Have the writings of the watchers, the fallen angels, been discovered in pre-flood city Gobekli Tepe? And is this a description of the end of the world? Now, this Gobekli Tepe is one of the oldest archaeological sites in the world. Likely, it's a pre-flood city in southeastern Turkey that could contain these writings of the Watchers, as recorded in the Book of Jubilees by the famous Jewish historian Josephus and by numerous other ancient Jewish writings. These writings hint that the inscriptions there may refer to the prophecies about what was at that time the yet-to-happen flood and the coming destruction by fire that happens in the end times. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters. And for this absolutely amazing teaching that combines archaeology, science, and Bible prophecy, we need to give a shout out to Michael Tarrin of our advisory team who helped research this topic. Now, let's start with the scriptures and the descendants of Noah. Kenan was the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah. Luke 3:36. The character we're going to look at first in this video is Kenan, the son of Arphaxad, who was the great-grandson of Noah. And as we said, his name was Kenan, and we read about him in this genealogy of Jesus described in Luke. We learn more about him, however, in the non-canonical Book of Jubilees. This aspect isn't mentioned in the Bible, but the concept we're going to discuss was an important part of a Jewish legend or history, so let's look at it. The son, Kenan, grew, and his father Arphaxad taught him writing. That's important, let's remember that. And he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city, and he found a writing which former generations carved on the rock. And he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it, and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the Watchers. Jubilees 8:2-3. So, if this account is true, this great-grandson of Noah, an ancestor of Jesus, discovered rocks which survived the flood and which contained the writings of the Watchers or fallen angels. So, although Jubilees is a part of the canon of Scripture, it isn't a real stretch at all to believe that there is a kernel of truth in this account. After all, Jesus referred to some of the stories in the Book of Jubilees in the Gospels. Many of the early church fathers referred to Jubilees, and Jubilees is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So although we cannot say this account is true, it certainly hints at truth. And if this particular story is true, it is possible these rocks with the teachings of the Watchers on them were in this city of Gobekli Tepe, where some of the most amazing ancient inscriptions in the world are located. Rock inscriptions that even secular scientists and scholars believe discuss prophecies of the end of the world. Now let's look at why this might be possible. Gobekli Tepe is only 425 miles away from the Mount Ararat area where Noah's Ark landed and where Noah was initially based. So as Noah's grandchildren and great-grandchildren began to spread out over the earth, 425 miles over 4 generations isn't that far from Noah's base of operation. And even more important, it is right on the path that the descendants of Noah would have taken from Mount Ararat to the plains of Shinar, where Babel was, according to the Bible. Here's what the Bible says. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar. Genesis 11:1. So first, the Bible tells us they traveled from the mountains of Ararat from the east in a westward direction until probably they reached the headwaters of the Euphrates River. Now this area is where Gobekli Tepe is. Then they apparently headed south down the Euphrates to Babel. This region where Gobekli Tepe is also where the biblical Haran is located, where Abraham traveled and stayed on his way to the promised land of Canaan. It's also where Isaac and Jacob found their wives. It was an area where biblical characters like Abraham and Isaac were comfortable. Why? Is it because their ancestors, someone like Keenum, stayed there at one time? Well, maybe. And this place, Gobekli Tepe, is the most likely place on earth where pre-flood writing would exist because we've already found it there. So what is Gobekli Tepe? It was a rediscovered site by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt in the 1990s, and it's a collection of massive carved stones crafted and arranged in a series of circles. Scientists believe Gobekli Tepe is much older than Stonehenge. Schmidt is convinced it is the site of the world's oldest temple. There, this Schmidt found standing stones or pillars arranged in circles, as we said. Beyond the main site on the hillside, ground-penetrating radar has found up to 20 more of these rings of similar standing stones in similar layouts. In the center of all of these circles are two large T-shaped pillars, encircled again by these smaller stones facing inward. This idea of the two large pillar stones is very important as we continue to study this. Keep this in mind, and we'll get back to it. The tallest pillars, however, tower about 16 feet high and weigh 7 to 10 tons each. They're massive. How are they moved? These are good questions. Many are carved with unknown writings and elaborately developed animals: foxes, lions, scorpions, and vultures. The vulture stone in particular is one that many scholars think foretells the end of the world prophecy. And again, getting back to the Book of Jubilees, this is a very similar idea of rocks with the writings of the Watchers on them that Keenum might have found. In addition to the normal animals found there are also other creatures, human-animal hybrids. To me, a clear sign of the Watchers or fallen angels who were performing genetic manipulations and corrupting the genes of man and animals. Now, how old is Gobekli Tepe? Compared to Stonehenge, it required much more advanced technology to build and carve, but yet Gobekli Tepe is much, much older, thousands of years older, according to scientists. That is just one more factor that points to a pre-flood origin of Gobekli Tepe and, of course, to the Watchers. Okay, now we have this basic idea of what this Gobekli Tepe place is. Let's continue about the aspect of the teaching of the Watchers and see what the Book of Jubilees says about what was on those stones. It contained the teaching of the Watchers in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and the moon in all the signs of heaven. And he, Keenum, wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. Jubilees 8, 3-4. So, if you remember, Keenum's father, Arphaxad, specifically taught his son writing. So it appears he could read these strange inscriptions and realize some of them were signs or omens in the sun, moon, and stars. They were astronomical signs. So, were they star signs? Were these animals? Star signs? Were they constellations? Maybe. It's possible. In fact, it's probably likely. It is likely that these standing stones are a star map of animal-shaped constellations marking different days and times. Perhaps it marks the time of the flood or the time of the end. More on that in just a bit. But first, let's get back to the idea of the two large T-shaped pillars found at the middle of each of these ceremonial circles found on the site so far. Remember, we told you that this was important. The reason is that ancient Jewish literature is full of accounts of something known as the two stele account, or the story of two standing stones or tablets. This is just like the two stones in the center of each Gobekli Tepe circle. Now, this account is found in the writings of Josephus, in the Palileia Historica, in ancient Armenian stories, and in material from the Dead Sea Scrolls, especially material from the Book of Giants. These accounts all differ from each other in terms of who wrote the tablets and what they were made of, but they all contain the germ of the same basic story. Before the flood, 2 large pillars were constructed of different materials, able to withstand either a flood of water or a deluge of fire. The reason given that why these were made was that a prophecy said God would destroy the earth, once with water, then once with fire, and these accounts about the 2 times God would wipe out the world were placed on these 2 steels, or these 2 standing stones. Now this part about the 2 destructions of the world exactly matches what Peter says in 2 Peter 3, 6-7. The world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. But by the same word, the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. So although this doesn't go into the same 2 steel story, it explains that basic concept. The second part of the similarity between the stories is that the stones were fashioned to withstand the catastrophes, one which could withstand water, the other could withstand fire. Now, hopefully you're liking this video because you're seeing something about Genesis and Gobekli Tepe that you've never seen before. And if you are liking it, hit the like button, not just because we need affirmation, but because this causes YouTube to send this video out to a wider audience who really need to see it. Now, back to the 2 standing stones. The tablets were to be a repository of the knowledge of man in order to survive the flood and to be passed on to later generations. Is this what's found on the tablets of Gobekli Tepe? If so, I would say it probably makes them important. Part of that knowledge likely are signs of judgment, first by water and then fire. The vulture stone, steel number 43, is what scholars, even secular scholars, have thought might be this sign. So let's take a look at this steel. The stone is decorated with a whole bunch of animal symbols, including scorpion, an ibex, many birds in various poses. At the bottom is a scene of an image of a headless man, maybe indicating danger or death. When I look at it, I don't really get what some of the experts say, but let me tell you what they do say. When engineers studied these animal carvings, they discovered the creatures might have been astronomical symbols, which represented constellations and a comet which impacted the Earth. Using a computer program to show where the constellations would have appeared above Turkey thousands of years ago, they were able to pinpoint the comet strike to like 10,000 years ago. The exact time shown by ice cores from data from Greenland. So this is one theory. Now, the most interesting part about that theory to me is that the culprit comet that might have struck the Earth is likely a cloud of asteroids formed by a former comet, Inky, which was estimated at one time to have been about 60 miles in diameter, but broke up about 30,000 years ago, leaving an orbital ring of debris that the Earth intersects with like every year, resulting in something known as the Taurids meteor shower in October or November. That last part, October or November, is what caught my attention because it's the same season as the fall feasts of the Lord. And that places a potential future strike in the right biblical time of year. Now, due to the precise orbit of this asteroid cloud, high-density regions of this debris intersect with the Earth's orbital path every 6,000 years. That caught my attention too. 6,000 years is a very interesting length of time. According to the theory of the 7 ages of 1,000 years each, that we agree with on this channel, and that we've explained many times, 6,000 years is the length of time from creation to the second coming, the final 1,000 years being the millennial kingdom. So, 6,000 is a very biblical time period. And what are the results of a comet strike? This also has a lot of biblical implications. A massive worldwide earthquake, then the ejection of massive amounts of dust and smoke into the air, blackening the sun and moon at night. The falling of the dust and rock back to Earth, resulting in massive meteor storms, winds, topping out of over hundreds of miles an hour, tsunamis, and the survivors of all this hiding in caves and bunkers in the earth. Let's compare this to what Revelation says happens at the sixth seal. And I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. There's the earthquake. And the sun became as black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became as blood. There's the darkening of the sun and moon. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig drops its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. Oh, there's two things. The falling of a ton of meteorites and a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it was rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the eminent people, and the commanders, and the wealthy, and the strong, and every slave and free person hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. Revelation 6:12-15. Wow, so that's describing all the same events that we talked about with the comet strike, isn't it? So the sixth seal could be an asteroid or comet strike. Was the vulture stone and Gobekli Tepe warning the pre-flood people of this coming disaster? I'm not enough of an expert to tell you for sure, but there is a lot of evidence pointing in this direction. But how close are we to this event? Click right here because Jesus said we are this close to his return. In that video, we'll explain how close. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.